Well, hello, my friends, and how are you? Welcome to the Jazz Real Book. I am your host, Jay Sweet. For today's show, I will share my conversation with pianist Al MacSween, who's been tearing up the UK jazz scene for quite some time. He is a member of the group Your Brother's Keeper, and recently the band, along with guest Gary Bartz, the legendary saxophonist, released the album Where Rivers Meet. So Where Rivers Meet brings together again Bartz and Your Brother's Keeper, a collective that emerged from a musical relationship that was first established through the band called Maisha, that was MacSween's earlier group. And it developed through several years of performing, touring, and recording together. And this album documents a shared approach built on improvisation, listening, and collective exploration. So the record's really cool. It places Bartz's saxophone with a contemporary kind of sonic setting, using synthesizers and acoustic instruments. And of course, at the center of the project is Bartz, whose career spanned more than 5 decades and includes collaborations with Miles Davis, Charles Mingus, Max Roach, Art Blakey, you name it. So a very interesting album because it introduces the listeners to this new collective called Your Brother's Keeper, a awesome band assembled from different members of London's jazz and experimental music scene, and places it with a legend like Gary Bartz. So once again, here to talk about it is Al MacSween. Very good conversation. I hope you enjoy. Check it out. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Nice to meet you, Jay.
Nice to meet
Where are
you.
you at the moment?
I am in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah, probably about an hour and 15 minutes from Manhattan.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. What about
Is that
yourself?
where I'm currently in London, southeast London, kind of
Okay.
Greenwich-ish, if you know the area.
Not well, but someday I'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to answer your question, yeah, that's where I live. So I'm pretty close
Ah,
to
okay.
the New Jersey shore, which is like a beachy area. Yeah, it's a nice,
Oh, lovely.
good place to be. Sure.
Nice.
And it's pronounced Ali, right?
Yeah, or Al. To be honest,
Oh,
my full name's Alistair. I usually go by Al, and I've recently been having this problem that my name looks exactly like AI.
yeah.
And it's only going to get worse.
Okay.
So some people call me Ali, some people call me Al,
Okay. You
whichever you
prefer
prefer.
Al, though.
Maybe Al, yeah,
Okay,
it's
cool.
fine. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to do the formal introduction. I'd like to welcome Al MacSween to the Jazz Real Book podcast to discuss a really awesome new record from the group Your Brother's Keeper, Where Rivers Meet, featuring Gary Bartz, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Um, Great album, man. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we had a lot of fun making this record, and obviously working with Gary's just been a dream, really.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
can you talk about how this project came together? Because I think this is the first recording under this name, right?
It's the first recording under this name, yeah. So we were working with a band called Maisha a few years ago, which was led by Jake Long, UK drummer, um, and Giles Peterson, the British DJ. He was putting together a festival called We Out Here Festival. I believe it was the first year of the festival. It was 2019, and he wanted to bring Gary over and pair him with some UK musicians. So Maisha became the band for that concert.
Mhm.
There was also some amazing musicians there. There was like Saul Williams was there. There was Dwight Tribble. There was Zara McFarlane, the British jazz singer. So yeah, we did this sort of big concert at this Giles Peterson's festival. So he was the initial sort of hookup. He put this collaboration together, and yeah, we had a great time meeting Gary and playing together. So that was the initial meeting. Um, at that festival, there was some people in the audience from a label called Night Dreamer,
Okay.
who are this label that they do these direct to disc sessions. So they cut the record as you do the session.
Hmm.
And they saw the concert and was like, this is brilliant. We'd love to. invite you guys to come and do one of these sessions. So following that concert, we went over to Haarlem in the Netherlands, and we made this director disc session with Gary, um, which was a lot of fun, quite intense. I mean, I guess you're a musician yourself, right? I'm seeing all the
Yeah,
guitars
yeah.
there. Yeah, so it's like obviously like cutting the record as
Hmm.
you play, and
Right.
you do a whole side at a time. So if you're doing three tracks on one side, you finish the track, you wait 5 seconds, you do the next track. It really is like very live. So we did that with Gary
Okay.
back in, I think that was 2020. And following that, we then did a few concerts around the record. We played at like North Sea Jazz Festival, a few like jazz festivals around Europe. We were due to tour a lot more. We were due to go to Japan and China and do a lot of touring that year. And then and COVID hit, so none of that happened. Unfortunately, we did a couple of gigs, and that was the end of it. But I think we all just felt, we just made this really nice connection with Gary. He seemed to be really happy. We've kind of felt we maybe had a lot more to explore in this collaboration, and as much as we had fun in this director this session, it felt quite frantic and chaotic. And I think we felt, it'd be lovely to get together and really like write some music together in a more sort of controlled setting, and think a little bit more about what kind of sound we want to bring to the record and the influences. So yeah, I think it was 2023 we went back into the studio. Gary was over in the UK, and yeah, we spent like a week kind of playing and writing. And yeah, so that's the record really.
Wow. So the writing process, I mean, was Gary a part of the writing process or was more the band itself?
I'd say a lot of the writing was done before Gary came.
Mhm.
Gary was over. I think he was playing a concert in somewhere in Europe with his own band. So we had a little session a couple of months before the record,
Hmm.
before the recording session, and I think we were really interested in bringing a more sort of, like electronic ambient kind of angle to what we were doing. So we had this session a couple of months before where we had this rehearsal room. We had this like before Gary arrived, we had this like mic set up. We had all this sort of like modular synths and effects,
Hmm.
everything running through the mic. And we sort of didn't discuss it too much. Gary just came in the room, we started playing, he went over to the mic, and yeah, he just sort of started interacting with all this kind of like modular sound effects. And I wish there was a recording of that first session because it was just like so
Yeah.
exciting. And I think we just felt like, okay, we've hit on a sound here. This is going to work. I mean, it's still Gary just very much doing what he does and being completely free. But now there's this extra layer, this extra sonic layer for him to bounce off and to sort of frame what he does.
Right.
So then we went away and was like, okay, well, let's write some music that is going to allow us to explore this kind of sound. So, I mean, a lot of the writing was quite kind of loose. It wasn't like very, constricted songs. It was like we
Sure.
wanted to keep this kind of openness. So there's like quite ambient sort of textures in there. So we were writing things that's like, okay, it's not too prescriptive. We want to, we're almost writing moods rather than songs for a lot of it. So when Gary came in, we had these kind of sketches of sounds, or, kind of loose melodies or tonalities. And then yeah, in the studio we kind of developed things some more. There's also one of Gary's tunes on the record.
Okay.
Um, um, but yeah, sorry, that's not on the record. There's other songs that didn't make it yet, which may come out at some point. But yeah, so we
Sure.
did like, some of Gary's stuff, some stuff that was like quite written, and then some stuff that we just, jammed in the studio.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's quite a fluid process, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean it's beautifully recorded. I mean, could you talk a little bit about the recording a little bit more? Like was it live to tape or were you guys laying down parts and layering? Because it's really got a great sound.
Yeah, no, it did come out really nice. I mean, it's not recorded to tape, but it was recorded in this brilliant studio in London called Lightship, which is actually a boat.
Oh,
It literally is a lightship. So it's these like huge boats that they would use as mobile lighthouses.
mm.
So it would literally be like in the sea off the coast with a big light on it. So it's
Uh,
this like enormous ship which is now moored in South London. And yeah, the whole ship's been gutted out now, and it's like this beautiful studio. I mean, there's probably a lot of records of like, on the UK jazz scene that you've probably heard that have been recorded there. Like, Nabaya Garcia recorded her record there,
okay.
Daniel Casimir. There's a lot, like, it's a bit of a go-to sort of studio for a lot of UK jazz stuff, and the engineers there are brilliant. And it's just got this really nice feel to it. You really feel you're in this little world outside of the city, and when the tide gets high, the whole boat starts kind of swaying and
Yeah,
rocking
yeah.
a bit, and it's
Okay.
a brilliant studio. But yeah, we really did most of it live there in the studio. We really wanted to sort of capture a sort of live sound. There was some little bits we did in post, some of the effects on the sax and some like extra synth layers we added in. But I think we were keen to really try and get a live sound. And a lot of the synth layers, we sort of tried to find ways of being able to do that live. So I had these like I was the keys player in the
Sure.
session. So we were doing things like I was playing, sort of piano road sounds, but then I was layering them through synths. So when I was comping for Gary's solo, that would also be triggering these like secondary layers on the Moog or the Prophet, so that some of the synth layers were actually being informed by the live sort of jazz approach. So we were
Mm.
sort of trying to find some kind of middle ground. We didn't just want to like produce an album. We wanted to sort of capture that
Yeah.
liveness.
Yeah, I think one of the great features of the record is your synth work and your like, and that's why I asked because it's like there is a lot of going on it sometimes, and I was wondering how you were to trigger that in a live setting, but you just you just explained it in a great way. When did your fascination, if you will, like of synthesizers and digital sound sort of come to be? Was there a influence that you can sort of talk about?
Yeah, I think like one of the big influences for me was actually Alice Coltrane, who I
Mm,
know didn't use a lot of synths, but we had this during lockdown. I started to become really interested in synths, and I was just. I mean, I love, the sonic textures of synths, but I've never been a big fan of synth solos,
okay, yeah.
like epic big synth solos, even when it's like, some of my favorite pianists on them. This, I don't know. I came across some of Alice Coltrane's work where she's playing this Wurlitzer, I think it's like a Wurlitzer add-on synth that they had on this old organ.
Mhm.
And it's just this beautiful, warm, organic sound. I mean, I think she said she was actually trying to emulate Coltrane on the synth. And I think she was also very influenced by Indian classical music and, instruments like the Shehnai and this like synth sounds she found. It's so warm and organic, and I could listen to it all day. And so I started, actually, I got a Moog to try and sort of get close to that, really.
Yeah, yeah.
So she was like a huge influence. Also, like people like, Terry Riley,
Okay.
um, some of the sort of like more ambient stuff. But I think like definitely for me, like lockdown was a, a big influence. It was having a lot of time on my own in a house, um, and it felt like synths were a way of being in the universe from a small room, and
Yeah.
a lot of time on my hands to really study and explore this. So yeah, I'd say that was like probably the big start of my synth journey, and then that escalated into modular synths and several a very expensive, interesting journey.
Yeah. I was gonna say you must have like an arsenal now. Is it a lot of your
It's
stuff vintage? Is it vintage equipment? A lot of it.
Most of it's not actually. I've got I like some of the more modern synths like the Prophet, the Moog Sub 37, the things where you kind of still have that vintage analog sound, but then you've got these sort of digital capabilities with it. Um, which, especially on the road, and especially being able to link up with like, more contemporary, like with like MIDI and sequencers.
Sure.
And I kind of quite like that sort of integration of the two. If I was richer, I would probably have a lot more vintage stuff as well,
Right, right.
but that stuff's very expensive. And I think I also became interested in the modular stuff, which I guess isn't really very vintage, and the ability to sort of build your own, synthesizer and,
Yeah.
create what it is you need for that specific project.
Yeah, I took like 2 weeks to try to go through that rabbit hole. I'm not a keyboard player, but I could play. And I was like, this is like, I was realized I was taking so much time away from what I like playing the bass and doing the things that I actually have to do. That I could see how like you could go down a wormhole of sounds, but it's so fascinating, if you really put the time in. That's cool. So in terms of like the group, getting the group together or and just the group concept, I mean, were these musicians you had worked on with prior to this? Like, I know you mentioned this older recording. Same individuals on that one?
Yeah, so it was essentially the same band as I mean Maisha back in the day. So like I said, that was the
Mhm.
kind of the original group, which
Right.
had like slightly different lineup, but as you know, in the jazz scene, people get busy, and we kind of ended up with this group that was like quite modular, and there was different people coming in and out of it. And the group that was together at the time we met Gary essentially became the band that formed Your Brother's Keeper. So we'd also worked together over the years in various different projects, and we'd sort of felt like we'd developed something quite special together, specifically with Gary. I mean, personally as well as musically, we kind of really hit it off with that group. So yeah, that was the band for the session, and then Chelsea Carmichael, the tenor player, she was sort of added in afterwards to sort of like, fatten up the horn sections, basically add this extra layer to it.
Sure.
Um,
So how did you guys come up with the group name?
the group name, that was Jake, really, the drummer that came up with
Okay.
that suggestion. I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, it's hard coming up with names these days. Every time you think you've come up with a brilliant name, someone's got it. Some obscure death metal band somewhere's got it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. 'Cause
So I
I
would
know,
kept working through name.
yeah, this is because you type in like Brothers Keeper and a couple other bands do pop up.
Yeah, yeah. I think one actually started like the week after we kind of announced the name and stuff, which we got a feeling might be an AI band. I don't know. But
Okay.
there's like, yeah, there was a few sort of working titles of bands, and I don't know how Jake found out. Maybe read it in a book, or he was like, "Oh, what do you think about this name?" And it was much better than any of the other ones we had at the time. We felt it had a nice, a nice kind of sentiment behind it.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, it wasn't. I don't think it was like a name that we felt deeply represented our music, but we needed a new name. And yeah, there's something nice about it. The sort of it's got the classic biblical reference.
Right.
And we felt, in some way, a lot of Gary's music, I think, is like, relating to, you know, it's quite sort of compassionate sentiments of peace and love and
Sure.
support. And, this is the sort of feeling we'd had working with Gary. So I think we felt, it kind of summed up some of the sentiments behind the music we were playing, and the music, Gary's sentiments as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've yet to interview Gary Bartz, but was wondering if you could just maybe talk a little bit about his personality and like just his openness, because seemingly you are all younger musicians than he is. He's
Mm,
what I would call an elder statesman of jazz at this point,
mm,
uh, and has worked with many of the greats, and he's one of the
yeah,
greats. So
yeah.
what is he like? I mean, he's very open to new ideas, it sounds like, and the younger, I don't know. I'm just curious about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's an incredibly, and he's got this amazing kind of youthful energy. He's kind
Mm,
of somewhere between a wise old master and a excited toddler. He's got this beautiful sort of youthful energy. as well as this amazing sort of depth and yeah, openness. I mean, it was so inspiring spending time with him, and those days in the studios we sort of have breaks and he'd sit around and tell us these brilliant stories about Miles and Art Blakey, and it was a real sort of like education of working with him and just listen to him speak as much as play. But yeah, he also, it was quite inspiring to see someone at his age. I think he's 86
Yeah,
now. What's
he's
his
in
age?
his
He's
yeah,
yeah,
he's
and
at least in his mid 80s. I know
he's
that.
mid 80s, yeah. And see someone at that age that's still so forward looking and open to new sounds and new ideas, and he's obviously very rooted, but he's not stuck in his ways. He feels like someone that's always moving and trying new things, and
Mhm.
he goes running every day, and he's just this kind of incredibly sprightly, youthful character,
Yeah,
but an incredibly wise, but a gentle, and just a real joy to be around. No element of sort of like ego, or for someone who's so revered.
Mhm.
Just sort of, yeah, he's a very easy person to spend time with. A real
yeah,
joy.
yeah. I find that the few occasions where I've had a chance to play with like maybe some of the elder masters, they do. I found they do like to talk, and very frequently they'll talk about like I had the opportunity to work with Ted Curson, who was another Charles Mingus
Ah,
disciples, right?
wow.
Yeah, and obviously Gary also had a connection with Charles Mingus. But the stories were like is great as the playing sometimes, And I really
Mm,
love that about this music, how open, some of these musicians who are highly revered are. I mean, having the show is really proven that. I mean, having
mm,
like George Benson on and Ron Carter and you name it, Stanley Clark. Yeah, they're so open to discussion, which is so cool.
mm,
Not a question, just
yeah.
just a statement. But so if you could talk a little bit about sort of like the jazz scene in London, if you would, like what's going on there
Sure,
currently.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, as I'm sure you know, the last kind of 5, 10 years, there's been this real kind of boost in the UK jazz scene here. There's been like obviously, a lot of new musicians come through, and a sort of, I think a lot of new influences have come into the scene, which has just been really, really exciting. There's been a lot more influence of, say, like dance music, electronic music, like Caribbean, West African music, um, South Asian influences. There's, I think it's really just breathed this, sort of fresh air into the whole scene. It's become, I'd say a lot more diverse. There's like so many amazing like female performers on the scene. All these different cultural influences that are now part of the jazz scene. I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of music. I mean, it depends how we define jazz, which is maybe a whole other question.
Right?
But there's it's just been so exciting to see the jazz scene reconnect with young people and become, cool again. I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was maybe a kind of stuffiness to the jazz scene, and you would find it mostly in expensive jazz clubs and jazz festivals, and now you have bands like Ezra Collective winning the Mercury Prize and playing Wembley, and
Sure.
this like young working class people wanting to go out and listen to jazz and also dance to jazz, that reconnection with jazz being a form of dance music as well.
Hmm.
um yeah, it's been very interesting in the UK, and some very interesting like bands have come out the scene. There's a real sort of like openness there. Um, I mean, like I say, I don't like. There's a lot of stuff there that I don't know how much you'd classify it as jazz in the sort of classic sort of, it's not necessarily like bebop, or people are not playing standards. But actually, a lot of the musicians that are there have come through that, and
Hmm.
have that sort of rootedness in the sort of, American Songbook and that kind of thing, but they're bringing in, a lot of other influences, particularly like Afro beats, like dub and reggae, and like also a lot of like UK dance styles, like dubstep and grime, and so it's quite exciting to see this kind of these different styles kind of mashing together, and just opening up these opportunities you know for artists here to sort of travel the world. You get people like Nabaya Garcia, Yusef Days, Shabaka Hutchins, these artists that are like now touring the world. They're signed to Impulse, or they're kind of really, I think it feels like there's a sound of the UK scene at the minute, which is quite interesting to be part of.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm not as familiar as maybe I should be. I mean, I think the New York scene is still very much based around the traditional standard American songbook-esque kind of
Mm.
stuff. Of course, there's a lot going on and all the time, but so the basis for my show is, in addition to the interviews, I take a jazz real book tune each week and I break it down, talk about
Ah.
the masters, and then I sort of demonstrate the different elements. I was wondering if you could talk about maybe your history with this music. How did you first come to play jazz, and even really how to come to play and get into music?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the north of England in a tiny little town called Colne, which you probably definitely won't have heard of. Most British people don't know it. But funnily enough, this town, and like a few towns in the north of England, had this huge blues scene. So when I was growing up, my sort of local folk music essentially was blues, and like, blues rock, and, any pub or bar you went into, people were playing, Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and BB King. And so there was a huge blues festival, like big town festival every year was a blues festival. And this was kind of the music that everybody knew and could play. So I really grew up like, that's how I really got into playing piano, was playing like blues piano and, boogie woogie and this kind of thing. Um, and my first band when I was like 11, 12 years old was like a little blues band with my brother and some friends. And
Okay.
so I was just like really into blues music to start with, which, obviously easily leads into jazz. And, so then I started getting more into, yeah, like jazz, reggae, funk, a lot of like, blues adjacent styles, I'd say. And then eventually, when I was 18, I moved to a city called Leeds, which you might know,
Okay. Yeah.
again in the
Mhm.
north of England. It's a big city with like a big sort of jazz course. It's a big student city. So I went there to study jazz, which is very much like, yeah, studying the real book, studying
Mhm.
bebop.
Sure.
Um, which was amazing. But at the time, Leeds was and still is a really interesting city for music. I mean, one of the great things about the UK is we just have this diversity of culture.
Yeah.
So I got to Leeds, and there was this huge like, there's a big like Cuban like Latin scene there. There was a massive funk scene. There's a big like Caribbean community there. So there was a lot of sound system culture, dub, reggae. There was an enormous Indian classical music scene there,
Mhm.
which I got really heavily pulled into, and then from that started traveling to India every year and studying classical music in
Oh, wow.
Calcutta with
Okay.
a teacher there. There was just all these different scenes happening in Leeds, and Leeds is it's not an enormous city like London. So even though it had these strong scenes, it's small enough that these scenes kind of cross over and kind of cross pollinate. So you get, jazz musicians playing with Indian classical musicians, or you get Cuban musicians playing with flamenco musicians, or you get
Mhm.
all this kind of really interesting crossover of the scenes. So when I got to Leeds, I mean, like, by day I was, you know, trying to play like Bud Powell, and I really
Uh-huh.
wanted to
Right, right.
play like an American, jazz musician. But then, I was being pulled into all these other scenes at the same time. I was playing in calypso bands, I was playing in salsa bands, I was playing in reggae bands, and I was, playing with a lot of Indian classical musicians. So even though I was studying jazz, I really sort of started getting pulled in all these different directions. And I think as much as I absolutely adore, like black American improvised music, I think at some point I started feeling like not necessarily an imposter, but I felt like I love this music, but it's not necessarily authentic to my life and my
Sure.
experiences in the UK.
Hmm.
But I think that really informed, my approach to wanting to, like Indian classical music, for example, when I came across that, because I was already, a massive train head. I was, I
Sure.
love McCoy Tyner and modal jazz and Pharoah Sanders and all this kind of thing. So Indian music at that point was just fascinating to me. It was this like, this depth of approach to modal improvisation. And I think from having that grounding in playing jazz, it really sort of opened me up to, to all these other styles. And that's kind of basically what I've done ever since. I've moved to
Mm.
London since then. And, London's just like even crazier. The amount of scenes that are happening here is just, amazing. And I think if you're open to that, you can really like learn so much. There's so many amazing people to play with here. Um, so this is the kind of feeling I have in London and the UK, that there's just this constant cross pollination of styles that I think so much great British music has really come out of.
Wow, that's so cool, man. That's great. So, did you studied at a university?
Yeah, it was Leeds Conservatoire.
Okay.
So it's like a dedicated music school there in Leeds,
Mhm.
which I believe was the first jazz degree you could do in the UK. It's started
Oh,
in Leeds, so it's got quite a history there. A lot of like amazing musicians came out of that school. I mean, they also do classical music and music production
sure.
and popular music, that kind of thing. But the jazz scene there is, yeah, very strong.
That's awesome. Yes. Oh, cool, man. So, yes, I mean, for my listeners, I could say this recording where rivers meet, which I want to ask about that title as well. I mean, it's very accessible, even for like non-jazz aficionados, if you
Mm,
will. I mean, beautifully recorded, and like you said, it's got it's almost ethereal at times for these
mm,
beautiful textures, and there's a groove bass to it as well.
mm,
I like the bass player quite a bit. Uh,
mm.
so I would definitely recommend this record. Right now, there are two singles out currently, right? Ground Loop, I believe, in Cauldron, uh,
Mm.
both awesome. But when is the full record? Do you know when the full record is released? I think sometime mid-June, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. It is mid-June.
Yeah.
I've got the 19th in my head, but I could be wrong with
I
that.
have it. Let me see. I have it. Yes, June 19th.
Ah,
Yeah. So okay, yeah, and it'll probably be on all the streaming sites. Is there going to be a physical copy as well, a LP perhaps?
yeah, it'll be out on vinyl.
Nice,
I think CD as well. Yeah, definitely out on record. Yeah.
excellent. And then in terms of touring, with the album or for the album, anything? What's planned?
Yeah, we're just in the process of putting that together at the moment. So we're going to do a record launch in London on the 20th of August. Um, at a brilliant night called Church of Sound, which has been running for a few years. It's this beautiful church in East London that the band set up right in the middle, and you're playing around,
Nice.
and they've been putting on some really interesting gigs there for quite a few years. They used to do this thing where they'd ask a band to come and do a songbook
Mm,
of an artist that's really inspired the band.
okay.
So the first half would be playing the music of an artist that really inspired them. The second half would be they'd do their own set. And there's been some brilliant people play there over the years. And they're good friends. It's a really beautiful night. So that's where we're going to do the launch. And we're also going to play We Out Here Festival, which is Giles Peterson's festival in around the same time. I think it's the 22nd of August. So that's going to be really nice because that was the festival that we first met Gary at like
Okay.
7 years ago. So that'll be nice. There's a few other things coming in at the moment that are not confirmed yet, but yeah, fingers crossed we'll get to tour some more with Gary.
Nice. So for that church, that in the round gig, are you playing the music of a certain artist as well, or just
We're not. We're just doing that as an album. So they opened it up a bit since then. That was how the night kind of started. In fact,
Mhm.
Maisha did a Church of Sound. I think maybe 10 years ago. I think they did Alice Coltrane songbook for the first
Wow.
half, and they did their own set. But yeah, no. I think for this, it'll just very much be a straight up gig, which will be brilliant. It'll be really nice. Yeah.
If you had to choose an album to do, had they required it, would an out? Is there a certain album that comes to your mind, or a certain artist,
um,
perhaps?
I think I don't know. Maybe I would say it's maybe a bit of an obvious one, but with Gary, I think like maybe something with Coltrane, something that's like I don't actually know if they've done a John Coltrane one yet. I'm sure they must have done, but I know Gary's very much like a disciple of Coltrane, and he's done so much of that music, and I think I think we've all been so inspired by Coltrane, and I think musically, this album is maybe not directly linked to Coltrane, but I think there's sort of the exploration of modes, like Coltrane's interest in Indian music and the way that you really like focusing on a mood, which I think is what Indian music is about as much as anything. It's about really constructing within a raga like a very specific like mood and how you maintain that mood. And I think that kind of approach to this album has been quite important.
Mm,
Um, Maybe Coltrane, but
yeah.
it feels like a heavy one to do as well. So I don't know.
Well, that would be timely.
I
I mean,
mean,
a lot of my
maybe even one of Gary's own
oh,
records.
there you
I don't
go.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, now that it's Coltrane Centennial, he would have been 100 this year. There's a ton of festival, ton
Is
of
it?
yeah. So just
Ah.
recently I've had them all on. Joe Lovano was one who just came on did because they're doing a hundredth and Miles too. Both of them 100 years old.
Of course, yeah.
It's pretty wild, right?
Wow. So they were born the same year.
Yeah.
Is that
Um,
100 years? Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Ah,
26. And also Ray Brown, the bass player, who I wrote his biography, so that's on my mind. So yeah, like
really?
yeah.
Ah,
Uh,
wow.
so a lot of talent a lot of talent was being born that year.
It was a good year. Good
Good year for jazz music.
year.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Any other projects you want to talk about? Anything else you have going on that you'd like people to know?
Sure, yeah. I have this quite interesting record coming out in July with it's my own project. It's a band called Kifaya. And we've been working with this amazing singer from Afghanistan
Oh, wow.
called Elaha Surur, who she's a very interesting artist, has a very fascinating story herself. She had to flee Afghanistan as a refugee, basically because she was a musician and a woman. She had this crazy experience traveling to, eventually ending up in the UK. And we already had this project, which was a pretty open sort of collective. We worked with a lot of different musicians from different styles, and we met her, and she was just like fascinating. And we'd never heard, I don't know if you've heard any Afghan folk music,
Some,
but
yeah. Mhm.
it's, yeah, it's like really interesting music. It's amazing, like wonky grooves in a
Mhm.
lot of stuff in seven. Um, this is the second record we've made with her. And this one we're going in a much more sort of psychedelic synth kind of rock post-punk kind of thing. So it's kind of like jazz psychedelia meets Afghan folk music.
Oh,
So we're like super excited about this. I mean, one of the really exciting things about it is it really feels like we're sort of figuring it out as we go along. I've really looked to try and find if there's any bands doing this, and so far I've not really come across anyone. So there's no existing scene of this. So it's like there's no rules, anything goes. We're sort of exploring it as we go along. So yeah, so this record's coming out in July,
oh,
which we're
cool.
quite excited about. Yeah.
That sounds really
Um,
interesting, man. Maybe ask her if she'd want to come on and discuss it. That sounds like a fascinating, sounds like a
yeah.
story there.
She's a
Yeah.
she's a fascinating person. Yeah, I'm sure she'd love to speak to you. Yeah, I'll mention it to her for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. And for people who are maybe looking for you or your projects, is there a website that they can go to? Oh, you froze up there.
Yeah, let me just check the name. It's oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, you're back now.
Hello?
It'll catch up in a second.
I'm back.
Okay,
Okay, yeah, you can check. Okay,
I'm here.
yeah, you can check our website. It's Kefaya, which is KEFAYA dash music.com.
Okay, great.
Have all the information there about touring, release, and stuff. Yeah,
Cool. Well, it
yeah. How
seems
about
like,
you? You're mainly a guitarist, bass player.
yeah, bass player primarily, but I do play a lot of gigs on guitar. And yeah,
Brilliant.
a lot of my gigs are late, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. So, around. But yeah, you could check my stuff out if you want. I'll send you the link.
Yeah,
But
I'd
yeah,
love to hear your music. Sorry, I should have listened in advance, but it's been. I'm going to Australia tomorrow for a tour, so I'm just like frantically trying to pack and catch up with bits before I go. So not
do
had
you
much
ever
time.
you ever make it to the States?
Not so much, to be honest. I came over once to play at is it Winter Jazz Festival in New York?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah,
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 we did that one once. That's the only one other concert in Chicago. But yeah, again, I had some like big tours booked in 2020, which all got cancelled by COVID, and then those projects have not happened. So I would love to come over with Gary. That would be really exciting to bring this music over to the States.
sure, no doubt.
So yeah,
Well,
we'll see what happens with that.
yeah, maybe someday we'll cross paths in person, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so. Are you ever over in the UK?
It's no, I not yet.
Not yet.
It's on the wish list, man, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping to make it happen soon. Yeah, very
Yeah,
cool.
man.
Hey, it was great talking to you, and good luck with all the projects. And once again, check out Your Brother's Keeper. The name of the album. Oh, I just lost it. I know it. Wait, Where Rivers Meet.
Where rivers
Sorry.
meet.
I have so much going on. Featuring Gary Bartz. And again, there are two singles out now, and you can check out the full album come June 19th, I believe. And thanks again, man. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, great to meet you, Jay. Thank you so much.
All right, best of luck.
Okay, all the best. Bye bye.
Well, all right, all right, all right. There you have it. Al MacSween, very cool guy. Great album once again, Where Rivers Meet, from the band Your Brother's Keeper with Gary Bartz. So, to learn more about the show, go to jsweetmusic.com, and on there you'll see where I'll be performing as well. Lots of gigs lined up. All my writings, my books, my articles are all there as well. If you are looking for music education, either in person or online, go to sweetmusicacademy.com. Located in Howell, New Jersey, over 20 years of business, where we've taught thousands of students. So I have a full lineup of great teachers, and once again, online lessons are available. So until next time, stay cool and keep swinging. Peace.